Okay, welcome back, guys. So we've taken care of our first topic for the day. Given one trig function, identify all the others. So we have one other topic to talk about today, and this topic is actually going to be fairly quick. It's pretty straightforward. So let's take a look at it. It says, learn to use trigonometric inverses to find acute angle measures in right triangles. All right, so let's take a look at first example here. So now we know everything about all the sides. Now we got to learn how can we find angle measures. So we have this picture here, triangle ABC, and we're given some parts here, or some side lengths here, 24 and 30. So let's take a look at this first problem. Find the measure of angle C. So we're going to approach this problem the exact same way we approach every right triangle trig problem. Remember those 4 steps. Step 1, identify the angle. So I'm just going to write angle here. Step 2, label the sides or identify your sides. Step 3, pick the trig function. Step 4, solve, or set up and solve. So we're going to do that same thing. So first off, it says find the measure of angle C. So the angle we're dealing with is going to be angle C. Step 2, identify the sides. So let's take a look. From angle C, the sides we're given are this 24 and that 30. That's opposite the right angle. So 24 is right next to C, so that must be an adjacent side. And 30 is opposite that right angle, so it must be the hypotenuse. So now I've done step 1. Step 2 is identifying the sides. We did that. So now we need to pick our trig function. So let's remember trig functions, SOHCAHTOA, so sine, opposite over hypotenuse, cosine, adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent, opposite over adjacent. So those 3, if we look, we have an adjacent and a hypotenuse. So if we come up here, sine, that won't work. That's opposite and hypotenuse. Cosine, though, that is adjacent and hypotenuse. That's what we have here. So that's our trig function. So let's write out our equation. We're going to say the cosine of, well, we don't know angle C, so we're just going to put the cosine of C is equal to the adjacent, in this case 24, over the hypotenuse 30. So in this problem, what we're actually solving for is that C. So we're solving for this angle. And just like always, the angle always what goes with the trig function. So to solve for this angle, what we need to do is we need to get rid of this cosine. So to get rid of cosine, what we need to do is we need to do something called the inverse of cosine. Just like to get rid of adding, we do its inverse, which is subtraction. So the inverse of cosine looks like this. Oops. So it kind of looks like cosine to the -1, but really it's just inverse cosine. That -1 doesn't actually mean to the -1 power. So what this does is this cancels out our cosine. And so on this side, we're going to be left with a C. And on this side, since we did inverse cosine to get rid of that cosine, we're going to do the inverse cosine on this side. What's going to happen is we're going to put this inside that inverse cosine, inside the parentheses after it. Now on your calculators, if you look at the cosine button, I believe directly above it, you'll see that cosine inverse. So that cosine inverse button, you get that by pressing the second button and then pressing your cosine button. And what that results in is a cosine inverse. So you press second and then cosine. And then what you're going to do is just enter in that fraction. So it should start a parenthesis. Then you're just going to enter in 24 divided by 30. Now from here, if you enter that in, you'd enter that in like this. Press the second, in this case on this calculator, shift, cosine of 24 divided by 30. You hit enter, and you're going to get this angle measure here. Let me see if I can make that a little bigger. I don't know if that's bigger, but that's the answer you're going to get. So that is actually going to be the measure of angle C. So your angle is going to be 36.8698. So what we're going to do is we're going to round that to the nearest thousandth like we've been doing, so the third decimal place. So what we're going to get is this. C is equal to 36.8 Now it was 698. If we look back real quick, it was 698. So that 8's going to cause that 9 to round back up. And then if a 9 rounds up, it's going to cause that 6 to round up. So really what we get is 36.870 degrees. And this is measured in degrees because it is an angle. So what we can do, come over here, we can write this in, 36.870 degrees. And there we go. So that's the measure of angle C. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing for this next problem. It says find the measure of angle B. So the measure of angle B, let's get rid of all this stuff. Let's look at B now. So angle B, if you look at it, again, we're going to follow these 4 steps. First one, identify the angle. We're looking at B. Second one, identify the sides. 24 is opposite of B, and 30 is still the hypotenuse. So now I have opposite and hypotenuse. Go back to my SOHCAHTOA up here and figure out, well, which one's opposite and hypotenuse? Well, that is going to be sine. So I'm going to say the sine of, and in this case I'm dealing with angle B, so sine of B is equal to the opposite, 24, over the hypotenuse, 30. So now from here, what we need to do is we need to solve this equation for B. So just like we did up here, canceling out cosine using the inverse cosine, we're going to do the same thing down here. We're going to cancel out sine, be left with B on this side, by using the inverse sine. Now we're going to do 24 over 30. So now from here, we got to see what we'll get for B. So again, on your calculators, you're going to press second. My calculator here is shift, but it's the same thing. Then we're going to hit the inverse sine. Oops. So shift inverse sine of our fraction 24 divided by 30. Hit enter, and we get that this angle is 53.13 degrees. So it's 130. So we could just say that 53.130 degrees. So that is our angle B, 53.130. So if we look at those two angles, this is some way you can kind of check yourself to make sure you did it right. These two angles, because they're both the acute angles in a right triangle, they should both add up to equal a total of 90 degrees. So let's check. 53.130 and 36.870, do those add up to give us 90? 10, carry the 1, 8, 9, 10, carry the 1, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, carry the 1, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, they add up to give us 90 degrees. And that's it. So now we know that we did it correctly because they do add up to give us 90. So there we go. That's really all there is to this. Let's take a look at one more example and then I'll leave some for you guys to try. So first problem here. Again, all we're going to do is follow those same steps. Step 1, find the angle. So this one's on your worksheet. Step 2, identify the sides. Step 3, pick your trig function. And step 4, set up and solve. So let's do that. So first part, identify the angle. Well, we want to find this angle, so that's going to be the angle we're dealing with. So we've done that. Step 2, identify your sides. So our sides, we have this side here, which is right next to our angle, so that must be the adjacent side. And then this side, 15, that's the longest side of the triangle opposite that right angle, so it must be the hypotenuse. All right, step 2 done. Step 3, pick our trig function. So to do that, remember, you got to reference back to SOHCAHTOA. Hopefully you guys are starting to get these 3 memorized here, at least enough to be able to write them down so you can look back at them. So we have the adjacent and the hypotenuse, so sine doesn't work. Cosine, adjacent, hypotenuse. That's my winner there. So I picked my trig function. Now I'm just going to set up and solve. So I say the cosine of the angle, remember the angle always goes with the cosine, is equal to the adjacent, 11.3, over the hypotenuse, 15. So from here, anytime you're solving for the angle, you want to get rid of cosine. So to get rid of your cosine or any trig function, you use the inverse function. So if you want to make that note, solve for an angle by using the inverse. And then if you want to make that note, looks like that. So we're going to use that inverse. So we're going to do the cosine, or the inverse cosine of 11.3 divided by 15. Again, guys, just something you put in your calculator at this point. So you press, let me get out of here, shift cosine, because we want to do the inverse cosine, 11.3 divided by 15. Hit enter, and there we go. That's our angle. So our angle is going to be 41.120. Let's bring that down. X is equal to 41.120, and this is an angle, so it's measured in degrees. Let's write it up here, since it gave us a line to write it on. And we're done. So that's it. First problem done. What I want you guys to do, if you need to pause, and look, check this out. If not, take a look at this. I want you guys to try numbers 3, 5, and 7. Give those problems a try and come back and you can check the answers. Go ahead and pause now. I'd take about 3 to 5 minutes to do these problems. Okay guys, so here's the answers I got for those problems. Notice all I did was follow my 4 steps. Identified the angle, then I identified the sides, then I picked my trig function, then I solved that equation. That's all I did, same 4 steps every time. So take a look, make sure you got the same answers that I did. If not, make sure you ask questions. Okay, if you still need some more time, go ahead and pause the video. If not, we're going to move on to a quick knowledge check to see what you guys know. So try out this problem, see how you guys do. Pause the video now, and then we'll come back and take a look. Okay, so again, doing this problem, all we're going to do, identify your angle. Once you identify the angle, look at your sides. This is the opposite from that angle. This side is the hypotenuse because it's the longest, and that's the one the right angle is pointing at. So we have opposite and hypotenuse. So let's look at our trig functions. See which one out of SOHCAHTOA we're going to use. Opposite and hypotenuse, well, that's going to be sine. So we're picking our trig function. Now we got to write our equation. The sine of the angle is equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse. From here, all we need to do is solve for this angle. So to get rid of sine, we do that inverse sine. So the inverse sine of 33 over 37. And then from there, just got to put that in our calculator. So second sine 33 divided by 37. Press enter. That is our final answer right there, 63.112. So what we're going to get is 63.112. And remember, you got to put that degree sign because that is the units it's measured in. And there's our final answer. That's all there's to it, guys. All right, so quick recap here. Goals for today were to given one trig function, identify others. We did that. Then we learned to use the trigonometric inverses to find acute angle measures. So remember that inverses find the acute angle measures in the right triangle. Those are the 2 things we did. So let's look at a quick recap problem. See if you guys can do those 2. What I want you to do is try those out in your notes. Just put them in your notes and see if you can get those 2 answers. Try them. Pause the video. Come back to look at the answers. Go ahead and pause now. Alright guys, so here are the 2 problems. First problem, all I did was identified my angle, then I identified the sides, realized I had opposite and hypotenuse, so I needed to use the sine function, set up my equation, solve for the angle x by using the inverse, and I got the final answer of 61.045 degrees. And then this problem here, this is like those first problems we started today's lesson with. I said sine of theta was opposite over hypotenuse, so I drew a quick picture of that situation. And I said opposite theta is 12, hypotenuse is 15. Then I noticed I didn't have this third side, so to find that third side, I used that Pythagorean theorem. Solve the Pythagorean theorem, keeping in mind that my hypotenuse is always the c value in a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Solve that out, got an answer of 9. Then from there, I just used my SOHCAHTOA to get these 3 answers. And that's it, guys. So pause if you need to. If not, you are done. So day 3 of right triangle trig, done. Remember, guys, if you have any final questions, feel free to message me on Remind. And what I want you guys to do for extra practice, just finish that worksheet that you have. You got a couple more problems, mostly even problems there to do. Have a good day, guys.